Alright, here it goes. It starts.
Welcome to our podcast, The Gray Area, finally has a name, where we bring you relatively recent news about politics. Also, where our banner for the video is a higher quality than the video itself.
Mm.
I'm Sean, and this is my friend Miguel on the other side.
Yep.
Somewhere on the internet. Say hi, Miguel.
Hi, Miguel.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is a very serious topic. Recently happened like 3 days ago, I believe, 2 or 3 days ago.
It was, let's see. It was updated February 7th, so yeah, it was really recently.
Yeah, so it's still recent.
Right.
Now this is about Syria. That something happened in Syria. I'm not aware with all the things going on in Syria. Probably not as much as Miguel is. He probably knows a little bit more than me. But from what I've read from this article, it's sickening what happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just so you know, I can't pronounce half of these names when I'm reading the article, so I'm going to apologize in advance.
Right, Sean? You're on the CNN article?
Yes, I'm going to be reading the CNN article.
Right, okay. I have it pulled up on the screen for them.
Probably easier to read something that's quoted because it's more. If the information's quoted, it's not nearly as biased.
Right, it's a direct
From the place itself, because it's coming from the people, not from the news station.
Right.
So, Nicolette Waldman, an Amnesty International researcher, elaborated on the horrific conditions prisoners allegedly face. Now, a prisoner, they might have done something bad to be in prison, but they do not deserve, with all these numbers of people who have died in Syria, that those are crazy. They were all tortured, and they were publicly. Well, I don't know if they were publicly. It was secretly, wasn't it? It was secretly hanged.
Yeah,
They're all secretly hanged
this had happened.
over.
This hadn't happened, like, it had happened recently, but they had to find out. Like, this wasn't something that was posted.
Well, she goes on to say that they've actually been dying in massive numbers as a result of repeated torture in combination with the systematic deprivation of food, water, medicine, and medical care.
Right.
And that's sickening. It's terrible.
And the thing that we're talking about is what's on the screen is 13,000 people were hanged in secret at the Syrian prison.
Well, it's not a secret anymore. The report has gotten the attention it deserved. That's what Waldman has been saying. It's a big story, but for people who work on Syria, it was almost a test case for, does the world still care? Not just about death, but the fact that it was organized and systematic. That's the question.
Because I haven't heard anything about this. You figure if it was something, this big, that people would be talking about it, but, nobody's really,
Yeah, I agree.
At all. And it's been a couple of days since this has happened, and it still hasn't really.
It hasn't gotten as much attention as you'd think it would.
Exactly.
She goes on to say that, she says, I want to be very clear that these practices are unacceptable and they have to stop. They have to be brought to an end. Mass killings of civilians and extermination so that people are dying of starvation, of illness, of treatable diseases must stop. And Russia has a very special responsibility to uphold peace and security in the world. We are calling them on. We're calling them. My bad. We're calling on them to use their influence with the Syrian authorities to push for access to independent monitors to all of the prisons in Syria run by the government where these atrocities are taking place, so the perpetrators can be held to account.
Right.
I completely agree with this. It's reasonable to say that people shouldn't be dying in mass numbers, being tortured and killed and deprived of all of their basic necessities. Now, I don't care what you've done. If you're in prison, you need to be taken care of so that justice can be served and you stay where you are. I don't care what anyone says. They need to. They still need. They have as much rights as we do. Well, not necessarily, but in terms of living and having a standard of living.
And this is the
That's
thing, you know, well, we have different definitions of, you know, being put in a prison, I guess here. But when you're doing something bad enough as, you know, whatever they did to put them in that position, it doesn't make a difference because at the end of the day, we're all human, and this shouldn't happen. You know, it's not even about a political aspect, thinking about being liberal or being Republican. It's honestly just about what's right and wrong. You know, this is
I.
a really big ethical issue, like 13,000 people. You know, that's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
I completely agree. And uh, New York Times also posted. I mean, tons of places posted about it, but I feel like the best information came from these two.
Hmm.
Uh, so if you could switch over to the New York Times, if you have that, if you can
Yep,
pull that up,
it's right here.
because they go a little bit more in depth on the numbers and whatnot, and what the president had to respond with.
Right, yeah.
Do you have it pulled up?
I do. So it says basically the Syrian government has executed 5,000 to 13,000 people in mass hangings, and that's another thing. Like they hung them, all
Yeah.
of them. Thousands of people were hung. Like
And after being tortured,
right.
that's
That's it's not right. You know, it's in just one of its many prisons since the start of the 6-year-old uprising against Bashar al-Assad, which is the president now. This is the thing, you know, we only, as American people, only get to hear what the media wants to show us, you know. So
mhm.
we're not there, you know. There's nobody on live tweeting or recording any of this. So really, the major news networks is the only thing that we get to be aware and be conscious of what's going on in the world. So we've only seen this one incident when it comes to something like this. That doesn't mean in the 6 years that this has been happening, hundreds of other prisons, you know, have done the same thing.
Well, I mean, there are crooked people in prisons, like all the security guards, and
Right.
they'll do some messed up things. But I don't think it's to any extent like this. I've never seen it nearly this bad recently, at least with us.
Right.
So you can tell there's a difference.
Right.
And it says some prisoners have managed to stand on toilets to look out windows and see bodies carted away, and the number of slippers left lying on the ground. If there were 30 slippers, then we knew that 15 people had been executed. And that was said by Abu Osama, a former military officer detained in the prison. He was also quoted saying, there were usually between 30 and 80 slippers outside. That's messed up.
Right.
That means that they're all dead. Sorry if you hear people in the background, family and whatnot.
But, you know, this is the world we live in, you know. I mean, obviously this isn't being sympathetic to people who have done really bad things at all. But
Absolutely
at the
not.
end of the, no, because that's ridiculous. Because if you know, people do a lot of dumb things and belong in prison and, you know, and deserve what they get. But, you know, it's just when you see something on such a large scale, it makes you kind of question if every single one of them deserve that. You know, like we don't know because we were not over there and we don't know the whole situation, so we really can't
What?
speak on it like that. But it still kind of makes you wonder.
Well, I mean, if you want to read more about it, there are tons of different news sources just putting tons of information that if they're all saying the same thing, then you'd have to know that it holds true at least somewhat to a degree. So
Yeah, absolutely.
you shouldn't just take this with a grain of salt because it's such a impactful thing. I think that's all the time we have, because if you guys want to see any more of this article for any of for New York Times, CNN, you could just look it up, and you can see they go into detail over some of the conditions. We've only hit the surface of how much is shown. It's
Right.
crazy.
We're gonna talk about the China hits back at U.S.
I
Like we
think we'll
saw
do that
in
next
Turkey.
week.
All right.
All right. Well,
This was
thank you
the
for.
here. By the way, this is the chart that has the statistics,
Oh
the
yeah, on
number of
CNN.
deaths.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I have the statistics up right now, so you can see the whole estimated number of deaths is 470,000, and these numbers are just ridiculous. Like,
I mean, just the number of wounded people, 1.9 million.
right, and the
That is.
life expectancy is what messes me up. Like 48, and 2010 to 2014, in 4 years, the life expectancy has dropped.
Yeah,
4 years, essentially.
that's crazy.
It's ridiculous.
Anyway, this has been The Gray Area, our podcast that finally has a name. So, we'll come back at you next week from the power of the internet. I've been Sean, and this is Miguel.
Yep.